know what it is that I ask.
If you would have...
Then give me mine.
No!
You were dead.
Yes.
Yes?
I was. I'm not now, so why does it matter? I was trying to reach the fertile grounds to see if...
And you died?
Yes. The fertile grounds had failed even before my father split the tree.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
The tree didn't matter. My father had already broken the lock that held Ahriman. He broke it to bring me back. He'd never have done this. It was the grief. He was
a father.
I just want to fix this, please. We can't let Ahriman escape.
It's not your fault. It's Ahriman's. You hear that, Ahriman? We're going to fix this. You're not getting out.
Welcome welcome back. As I mentioned previously, I watched the Developer Diaries and I wrote some notes on what they wanted to achieve with certain systems and whether I thought they kind of achieved those goals or not. But before I get into that, I do actually want to do a quick review over what my process was previously and whether or not it's something that I want to continue doing. So for these quiet sections, I would kind of like do speed ramps using the speed points, like adding speed points and then just stretching certain sections that I want to, I guess, increase in speed. But what I noticed early on in the video was that there would be like sync issues, and for some reason as the video went on, those sync issues just disappeared. So the issue that I had initially just kind of wasn't there. But when I was busy setting up for this video, I kind of changed my method. I instead went with segmenting the video and then increasing the clip speed instead of using speed points, and it seems like it works the same. I did notice some minor issues here and there, but those were easier to fix because I could actually like just open up clips and get the sync correct if there were any sync issues. Whereas with the speed point, it felt as if I couldn't do much over there. I'm not sure if this approach or if this method is more intense CPU wise or if the other one is, but I do feel like this one gives me more flexibility, so I'll continue using this method up until I find more issues with it. But other than that, I think this video is going to be a bit more, as I said previously, it's not going to be as aimless, hopefully. I do have some points over here as I mentioned, and I'll just go over what the developers said in their Developer Diaries. I'll actually make the playlist public that I have for all of the Developer Diary videos that I watched, and yeah, some of them have like interesting concepts that they wanted to introduce. Most of them actually have names that I wasn't aware of up until I watched the Developer Diaries. Some of them actually I don't think were as obvious as they were hoping, but a lot of them I feel like they actually worked. I'll get into that just after this quick dialogue.
You think he's planning a surprise for us?
I don't think he's interested in us. It's the fertile ground.
True. I think I'd actually be more comfortable if he attacked us.
So if you've played any of the other games, you know that like the Prince of Persia franchise is a fairly linear, it has a fairly linear progression where you'll just do missions, move on to the next section and keep progressing through the game like that. Whereas with this game, it is a bit more open world. I never actually saw it that way growing up, and even during this playthrough, I never saw it that way, like looking at the game as an open world game. But after watching the first Dev Diary, they pointed out that they wanted to make the game open world, and the reason why they wanted to do this was to give the player choice. They said that they wanted to have the player decide which city they wanted to visit first and how they want to progress. And in order to move from city to city, they would have to use the prince's acrobatic abilities to get from place to place, which I actually feel it was a smart decision. The traversal is a big part of this game, and kind of giving the player that choice to decide, that choice of where I want to go next, actually works really well. Even though sometimes it leads to a lot of backtracking because of not being sure of where you go next. I think it's an interesting decision on the developer's part to give the player that choice of how they want to approach this game, even though there are moments where it does still feel very linear.
He's tearing the land apart.
He doesn't care about us. He's trying to destroy the fertile ground. Together, we should be able to get across if we get these beams lined up.
Even though I brought up the points of players getting lost in this open world and the game feeling a bit linear every now and then, the developers actually have safeguards put in place to kind of address those issues and that critique of mine, but I'll touch on those a bit later on. Within the first video, they also mentioned the concept of imagining a city where only major cities exist, which I found a bit interesting, because it's like every location is there's always something there. There aren't any locations that feel smaller than others. There's always something interesting to look forward to, or an interesting design choice taking place, or just there's nothing bad about this world. It also allows the developers to kind of create distinct environments from each other. So if you were to take the Vale, the city, and one of the other locations, I can't think of the name right now, but each of them feel distinct from the other. Like this area, there's a lot of machinery over here compared to the Vale, I think, where everything feels fairly mystical. There isn't much ground there actually, now that I think about it. Most of the ground is withered away. It seems almost like the city is built on clouds because of the spire of dreams. The towers that are just in the environment just feel as if there is no ground. You are so high in the clouds that you can't see anything else. And if you compare that to the city that Alika grew up in, where even though it's broken down, there's a lot more buildings over there, and somehow each of these locations feel as if they still belong within the same world. And I like the fact that they went with this approach, because like I said, each location feels unique from each other, but they don't feel out of place. They all feel like it's part of the same world, and I'm impressed that they managed to pull it off.
Ready. Alika?
It is not that you cannot understand, it is that you do not even question. Knowledge enlightens. You close your eyes in blind faith.
arrived.
What do you think he was doing to the fertile ground?
He must have been seeking to break the energy that links the grounds to the temple. He was trying to set Ahriman free.
Well, we better seek a way to finish him before he does that. That's how you got your powers. When your father brought you back?
You still want this magic? All you have to do is die and endanger the world, and then you too can do these things.
It's not your fault.
It doesn't make it better.
What's keeping these things in the sky? Ahriman?
No, these are the alchemist's work.
While I was watching the Developer Diary, I also made a note on something that one of them said, where they believed that the War Run was a signature move of the Prince, and since its introduction in the Sands of Time, they've tried to improve on it and keep it interesting, which I kind of agree with it being like a signature move. It's not it wasn't a very common move, I think, back then. And I also feel like whenever you see a wall run, your mind, maybe it's just me, but your mind would instantly go to, oh, that's something that the Prince of Persia does. And as for keeping it interesting, I do also agree with that. They kind of like, thinking about what they did in the Sands of Time, it was just going from one place to the other. In Warrior Within, they started introducing sliding down banners from a wall run or just dropping down. I don't think they've done much over there. But then in the Two Thrones, changing it up a bit, they went with the diagonal platforms, which you go from a wall run onto this platform and then jump diagonally, which I do agree they kind of kept it a bit interesting that way. In this game though, what they've done to make things a little bit more interesting, or to keep it like, or to innovate on it, let me rather put it like that, they've changed it from the wall run to the ceiling run. And I find it a bit strange that I never saw it this way while playing the game. The ceiling run just felt like a natural progression from the wall run, but I never thought of it as like being a branch from it. It just seemed like, oh yeah, this seems logical, even though it's a bit crazy. But yeah, I never thought of it as like a branch, and seeing it that way now, it actually, I see the connection, and I like what the developers did with that, just to kind of keep that traversal option fresh in this new entry. They also spoke about the combat system that they have in place, where it was created to match the reactivity and strategy that you can find in fighting games, and I'm not exactly sure if I agree with this like approach, because even though Warrior Within was more combat oriented, it had a lot of traversal like opportunities, whereas this game it definitely innovated in the traversal section, but the innovations in the combat sections, I'm not too sure if I like what they went with here, because it feels very basic, like just switch off your brain and do a couple of combos. They also mentioned that they used various games and movies as inspiration for the new combat system. They wanted to present these fights in a way that's like cinematic, and one of the developers even said that they wanted to kind of have their fights in the game rival like fight scenes that you'll find in movies. I can see how elements of their combat system supports what the developer said, but at the same time it's like the execution of what they were trying to do over here, I'm not sure if I completely agree with what they were going for. This game has a very fairy tale, it's a very fairy tale like game, and trying to make the combat the cinematic doesn't really make sense to me. I would feel like even maybe taking like a different approach, making the combat more puzzle-like, which I think they actually, saying it out loud, they might have actually tried doing that more with the warriors fights, because a lot of these fights are actually puzzles, whereas everybody else's fights, they are more based on, again, chipping away at an enemy's health. But the more I talk about this, the more I realize what they were going for, especially the reactivity part of the combat system. So yeah, I feel like just saying some of this out loud, I realize, yeah, that makes sense.
Heaven's Stair. No one has been inside this place for 10, maybe 20 generations. Now the plates are lit once more.
Ready to climb to the stars?
How many times have you used that line? Let's go.
Another thing that I found interesting while watching the video was when developers would talk about the fighting system, they would refer to each attack or each move set as a stance, and each of these stances were kind of treated as like building blocks to combos. So in the game you can chain together different attacks or maneuvers where you can either maintain an attacking stance and just keep on mashing away at that button, or you could kind of chain between your attack stance and your acrobatic stance where you'll start throwing the enemy around the battlefield, or you can kind of basically switch it between different stances, and that's how they treated building combos as if it is a fighting game. When I look at this, it seems almost like they tried to make it a bit too complicated, but in the end it actually made it simpler than Warrior Within. I'm gonna refer to the combat system over there because I feel like that's where they kind of peaked with their design, and from there it either got worse or it's just a variation of that.
Corrupted air. If you breathe it,
It'll be the last breathing you do. Well, if the only way is up, then let's go up.
we have to go down to reach the other power plates. After we've gone over there to activate this first mechanism.
Oh, let's just make it fast. I don't want to end up with a lung full of corruption.
So moving over to the second dev diary, the developers actually start talking about Alika's powers and how she saves the prince in dangerous situations and where that whole idea actually came from. I never actually thought that there was a reason for it, like a design reason for it. It just felt like they wanted to implement the system just because, but apparently there is a reason behind it. So what they said was they did this to make the prince seem more human and kind of retain the game's fast pace. I'm not exactly sure if I agree with this, because in the previous games and even in this one there are no sections or portions of the game where I think that the prince isn't human. So I don't know, just having this other character here that has superpowers or that has powers doesn't kind of make me think that, oh, okay, he's just a man. Now, whenever he moves around the world, I never think of him as, oh, he's a super being, he can do all of these amazing things. He's like, my thoughts were always, this guy is incredibly agile. He's always been incredibly agile. Let me rather say the character has always been agile. And even though this isn't the same prince from the Sands of Time trilogy, the idea of the Prince of Persia is like an agile warrior. That image is like stuck in my head. So seeing that they introduced this character to make this, to make the prince seem more human, it's a bit strange to me. Because it's like, there were never instances where you would think, oh, maybe the prince is actually more than just a man. And it's like, no, that's what he is, and that's why I feel like he's so he's a character worth sticking around, because it's like he's just a man and he's unfortunately stuck in the situation. And yes, he's super agile, and I kind of want to see how he's gonna handle this with that agility.
Get to the top before the alchemist chokes us off again.
The other reason why they implemented the system was to maintain the game's pace. I'm not sure if what they tried to do over there actually worked, because I feel like it does still break the game's pace. The only thing that it does is actually remove the need for a loading screen, which isn't completely bad, because I do know dying in Warrior Within, or rather just dying in one of the Sands of Time trilogy games, you would have to kind of load the game and then go back to where you started. Whereas over here, you kind of you go back to the safest point, which again, it retains some of the game's flow, but for the most part, that flow is still broken whether you have that loading screen or not.
Happens a lot.
Make things easier. Conform to my low expectations and give up.
You can do it!
Time you underestimated me. How do we get out of here?
Through that portcullis. That switch should raise it.
Well, let's pull that switch and get out of here. For every step we take, there's always one more.
And so the present becomes the past. Our actions now build the foundations for what comes next.
Depressing, isn't it?
The only other note that I have on the second Dev diary is about the warrior and how he differs compared to the other boss fights, and how the prince would have to kind of tackle the warrior compared to other enemies. So my note over here says the warrior accepted Ahriman's offer to save his people from a war, but couldn't return to his people once they were safe because he became everything they rejected due to Ahriman's corruption. When the developers brought that up, it's something that I appreciate a bit more now. Like, even though the warrior's fights already stood out for me, the character now kind of stands out even more. Everybody else seems like, all the other characters seem like they accepted Ahriman's offer out of like a selfish reason, but the warrior did it to protect his people. The game goes over that, but I don't know why. I never actually took note of it, but it's something that I'm gonna keep in the back of my mind while I'm playing through this again. And again, it's like this character means a little bit more to me now, not just because of the boss fights, but because of the story. And I feel like the booklet might actually just go over this as well, and I'll learn something over there about the character and maybe even like him a bit more, even though he is a bit of a pain to fight when I have to fight him. But yeah, it's not like he's a mindless follower anymore. It's like he's sort of become like this tragic hero in my eyes now, and just I like the fact, it's tragic, but I like the fact that they kind of wrote the character this way, where he unfortunately became everything that he and his people kind of rejected, and even though he did it for the right reason, unfortunately he still has to face the consequences now. Another note that the developers pointed out was that the warrior can be seen as Ahriman's muscle. I mean, he is the biggest of the followers.
The Queen's Tower.
Your tower? I've never owned a tent, let alone a tower.
It isn't my tower. It is dedicated to the women who ruled here.
That makes it yours.
My father is still king. He speaks for the Ura.
So the reason why I brought up that note that I made about the warrior being Ahriman's muscle is because the developers pointed out that it's a nice contrast between the strength that the warrior has and the prince's agility. They even compared it to the story of David and Goliath, which I can definitely see now, because it's not like you have to think a bit more when you're fighting against the warrior, which is something that I've said before. But as I was watching the Developer Diaries, I realized like it makes sense why a lot of his fights, they stand out a bit more, because it's a little bit different. You kind of you have to think a bit more when fighting against the warrior, which again goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the combat, where your encounters with the warrior feel more like combat puzzles and not just button mashing. And as I say that, I also realize that the combat in this game isn't really that much of a button masher, but it does kind of boil down to that eventually. But for the most part, it is like you kind of have to react to what your opponent is doing, whereas with the warrior you think a bit more about how you use your environment. I do think that that the developers might have been holding the player's hand a bit too much with some of these encounters, because Alika will basically just give you the answer that you need when fighting against him. I think it would have been nice if you could have figured in some of those puzzles out yourself. I feel like it would have been a bit more rewarding. Some of them do seem very obvious, which isn't a bad thing, because it's just like it shows that you as a player are paying attention to what is going on in this encounter. But at the same time, I guess that like if Alika doesn't point out or give you hints, the encounter might actually be a bit more difficult than it's meant to be. So yeah, like I like that they kind of had that approach with the warrior, where you have to think a bit more. It's not just a straightforward button mashing situation. You actually have to take your time and look at your environment and figure out this combat puzzle instead of chipping away at his health. Or you don't have to chip it away his health for too long if you do have to do that. It's a lot more just forcing him in a specific direction and then just knocking him off the edge. But even that is more engaging than just button mashing.
Fight.
Force him through the door! We must drive him out. Watch out!
That suits me.
Too far!
Bigger they are?
The more they boast about it. Keep your eyes open while I do the healing.
What happened to your mother?
She died. My father is all that is left. That's another step closer.
I've never known a queen. Not up close and personal.
You still don't.
Will you ease up on yourself? I know things haven't been too... Your mother's not here. Your father's having problems. But you're the one risking your life to put things right. Your mother would be proud of you. Oh, look, forget it.
Thank you.
Don't thank me. Just cheer up, Queenie. You're doing a good job.
You too. I just hope your mother doesn't find out about the tomb robbing and the priestesses. The donkeys and the...
Hey, you know, boys will be boys.
So just one final note on the warrior and the second dev diary before I move on to the third dev diary notes that I have. I mentioned something about like moving basically pushing the warrior in a specific direction before knocking him off, and how that to me feels a bit more engaging than like mashing buttons. I feel like it's because it now has to do with or that encounter has to do with your placement within the arena. You kind of have to force him in a specific direction, and if you kind of use the wrong combination of buttons, if you decide to attack him too much, you kind of get pushed back in the direction that you don't want to go, then maybe he starts forcing you back into the arena instead of you forcing him to the edge of the arena. The developers made a note of saying that a head-on fight with the warrior won't work. You need to make use of the prince's agility, and they invited me to take him down. And that actually feels a lot similar to what the hints and tips would say about the previous games, where you need to use the prince's agility to your advantage. And I like the fact that even though it might not be intentional, it feels like it's just a characteristic of the prince. Like, he's always, as I said before, he's always described as like an agile warrior, and in this game you have no choice but to use your agility to kind of take on this enemy. Whereas the other followers, they kind of again just fall into the, I think, the bucket of, oh, chip away at my health and you should be fine. But yeah, as I said, your placement within the arena kind of makes battles against the warrior a bit more engaging for me. And sometimes like interacting with the environment also like plays a factor, where you need to maybe knock him into pillars or knock him into the cage, and most of the time just knocking him off of the building. And as I said as well, the whole thing of just making sure that you are the more aggressive force, if I can put it like that, where you are always forcing him in the direction that you need to go, or that you need him to go, instead of him kind of forcing you away from where you win the encounter. Another thing that I just realized while saying all of this out loud is that most of your battles actually still boil down to like edge knockouts, where the warrior gets knocked out with, like, he's basically a one-shot enemy if you knock him off of the edge. The same goes for the concubine, the hunter, and the alchemist. But in those cases, I feel like it's easier to push them where you need them to go, whereas with the warrior, because of his size and his strength, it makes it a little bit difficult. So sometimes even luring the warrior to where you want him to be is another tactic, and I do think it's actually a tactic that I used a lot during this playthrough, which also makes it like a more engaging encounter for me. Just instead of like just knocking him in the direction and then eventually getting there, sometimes just waiting for him close to the edge of the building and yeah, watching him approach slowly and eventually having him attack you, or having him try to attack you, only for you to kind of just counter or deflect and maneuver around. It's a tactic that I've used a lot in this playthrough, and I don't think I've done that before, where I would lure him. I would usually just force him in a certain direction, whereas this time it felt just natural, waiting for him at the edge, because I know he's gonna come towards me, so I might as well just wait here, and as soon as he gets near or close enough, I kind of jump over him, and then I just knock him off when he's close enough and when the quick time event happens. As I say all of this, I realize that I'm still optimizing the fun out of the game.
You're on a mission from God, I get it.
It's not a mission from God, it's my mission. Ormazd is part of this, but this city is to do with me, my family.
As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, the art style of this game is one of the elements that like really stand out to me. And when I got to this development diary where they started talking about the art style, I was really interested in seeing what their thoughts were when choosing it, because I feel like going with this kind of art style wouldn't just be oh, because we want to have this type of art style. There has to be like a reason for it, and I'm glad that they actually went in depth with like talking about why they chose it, and even like I think they have a name for it, or either they came up with a name for it, or the art style itself is actually named after what they spoke about. I'm not gonna go too much in depth right now, because looking at my prep work there won't be enough time, but that will be the next section that I talk about during these quiet sections. But I'm keen to share what I came across and what I've actually learned about their decisions and this art style that they've chosen.
This is the Tower of Ormazd. The fertile ground is at the top.
If Ormazd is a god, why isn't he saving his city?
Ormazd doesn't care about stone and wood.
He doesn't seem to care about his people either, seeing the predicament we're in.
That's fine. Keep saying things like that, and then you can make enemies of two gods.
I don't think this tower is too stable.
Push him into the pillar!
You want to give him a back rub?
Just do it! Use the pillars against him! Push him into the pillar! Bring the masonry down on him!
Stop this thing!
This is Ormazd's tower. Ahriman does not rule here.
Ormazd is dust. Ruins.
Stay back, princess! We've run out of pillars. If I die, I don't want to get squished under rocks. People like me this shape. Girls like me this shape.
How many gods have you made angry?
Let's just get out of here. can't see a way down.
We have to go up, to the fertile ground. Watch out!
Oh! Well, who needs stairs anyway?
We can make it across that wall!
That's it, keep praying. Keep praying for both of us. It's very generous of you to risk my life for your god. Better not move again.
I hope it's not damaged.
Only one way to find out. Shall we get out of here before Ormazd drops his own tower on us?
Of all the people for Ormazd to send, why did he send you?
Me? I wasn't sent by anyone, Princess.
Oh, you just lost your way in the desert? You just lost your donkey? You just arrived here?
If Ormazd really wanted to help, he'd have sent 1,000 people. He'd have sent an army.
Sometimes all it takes is the right person.
Okay, you keep thinking it's your god. I'll keep thinking it's really bad luck.
The second black gate is opened.
Well, I didn't think we'd last this long. Might as well walk into some more danger.
I always thought that this art style was a form of cell shading, and I think maybe it does share elements of cell shading, but what the developers described it as is illustrative art style. They said that it's inspired by the fact that the new world is fantastical and fable-like or fairy tale-like, which I definitely understand, because the previous ones, even though they had like a fantasy setting and fantasy like elements, a lot of it was fairly grounded in reality, even though it is a story about time travel. The older games did deal with like more realistic things in a way. So I get why they kind of went with this more mystical art style. And the reason why they went with this art style is because it reinforces the idea that this is a storybook and that you can engage with the story taking place. I assume this kind of helped them like have a more focused design approach with the art style, instead of like pursuing a realistic art style that's more historically accurate. They also went on to say that because the world that they are building for this game isn't historically accurate, it doesn't really help anybody, or it doesn't help the game in any way. So I kind of like where they went with this idea. One of the developers went on to say that illustrative art style is meant to be, it's born of the illustration. So what they meant by that is, instead of using the illustrations as references, they actually attempted to create 3D environments that looked like the illustrations, which for me is like, it's an interesting approach because I don't think I've actually seen many games attempt that. Usually it's like they'll use the illustrations and kind of conform the idea to maybe a more realistic setting, whereas this time around they actually try to make the environment look as close to the art style as possible. And I feel like that also sells this idea that this is like it is a storybook, because a lot of the design choices here seem very fairy tale like. So I'm actually glad that they went with this approach for this game. One of them also went on to say that it is a combination of realism and fairy tale aesthetics. So there are moments where I do feel like maybe the environments, if you were to just look at them at a quick glance, some of them do look realistic. But obviously when you take a longer look at it, you'll realize, oh wait, this is actually a render and not, I'm not going to say that it's like photorealistic, but at a quick glance it will look like something that could actually exist, even though it might look a bit more fantastical.
The Black Gate's open. We have to kill this corrupted too?
We must release them from Ahriman.
Well, I'm sure they'll see it that way.
An important detail that the developers pointed out was that this art style actually helps the player immerse themselves in the areas that shouldn't be possible. And for some reason I never actually noticed that, so I think they did a very good job with what they were trying to achieve there. Like when I think back to the Spire of Dreams, a lot of those locations don't seem like none of these places seem possible. This whole area seems like it's flooded for the most part. The Spire of Dreams mostly looks like it's built on clouds. I think it's the Veil. I don't know if it's actually the Veil or not, but the area that the alchemist I guess rules over, most of those areas are like in the sky as well, but that's more built on like more based on machinery, but at the same time it's like most of it is story or fairy tale like. So, and none of them actually seemed impossible, because the art style just lends to that idea that all of this, like I said, it all lends to this idea that it's a story. So I never even like questioned, oh, how is this even like possible? It just, yeah, it looks like a storybook, so why am I gonna question whether something looks possible or not? So I think they did an amazing job like choosing this art style to kind of lean into that fantasy, those fantasy influences. They also pointed out that the art style helped the developers emphasize areas that are meant to be desolate and corrupted, and once the land is healed, they can like change the environment to look a bit more warm. And the change can be drastic, but in a good way. So when the land is corrupted, everything is like dark and dilapidated, whereas as soon as you heal the land, it becomes a bit warmer. Even though it's still dilapidated, you can see like a clear change in the tone that they used. It's again, not something that I noticed before, but it stands out now when I'm aware of it, that it doesn't even look out of place when you make those drastic grading changes. So I think going with this art style definitely helped with them being that drastic with color and it feeling still natural in a way.
So, this is the warrior's fortress.
Yes, the way forward is now open to us.
When we go in there, it's gonna mean us or him, alright?
He holds some of the essence of this place. We have to free that if we are to trap Ahriman.
Then you can't flinch. You still want to think this warrior can be saved, but he's made his choice.
I'll be moving on to my notes for the Dev Diary number 4, where it kind of combines a few of the things that I've mentioned previously, like the whole idea that this game is meant to be seen as a story, and something that I think I mentioned in my previous video. I'm not exactly sure when I'm saying a lot of these things. I know that's a bit weird to say, but the other note was that the compass system that they created to help lost players, and then maybe also a bit on the on-demand dialogue system that they created. So the note that I have on the story aspect of this game, or the storybook-like aspect of this game, is they made the decision to make the game open world so that the player can write their own journey, which I think actually fits really well with the aesthetic of the game, because not only does it look like a story, it kind of like, it now plays as like your own personalized story, even though it is very linear in some way. I like the idea that that's why they went with this art style, to kind of just again reinforce that idea that everything about this game is meant to be seen as a storybook, and that includes how the player approaches it, whether they decide to like beeline the story or kind of taking their time collecting light seeds. Not sure if a lot of people would have actually tried that out. Maybe they did, but I don't know. I know it's something that I wasn't very excited about a lot of the time, because I kind of just wanted to get down with the story, which I spoke about that already. But the other thing that they mentioned was the compass, which was created to help lost players. I mentioned something before where I think it was the open world can maybe be a bit frustrating if you don't know where you need to go, and I think when I said that, I completely forgot that the compass system was there, even though it's something that I used a lot during this playthrough. So I feel like I need to then take back what I said on that, where you can get lost. I mean, you can get lost, but the game has its safeguards to make sure that you are on the right track and that you actually know where to go next. And again, now that I say it out loud, that actually also ties into the whole thing of the whole idea of the player writing their own story, because you as the player need to decide where you want to go next, and then Alika will guide you to where you want to go. So obviously all of this was designed to kind of build on each other and create this focused idea that it's a storybook, but I never actually looked at it that way up until they mentioned it in the Developer Diary. And looking at it now, it all just ties nicely. Each system just helps the other to reinforce this idea that they had. And to just tie back to something that I mentioned in one of my previous videos, the art style also helps with like being able to pick this game up whenever you want to, because it doesn't age badly. This game is almost 20 years old now, and it doesn't look that way just because they decided not to go for like a realistic aesthetic. And it feels like a story, like again, it feels like a storybook that you can pick up whenever you want to. And I just like that. So it's like a game that you can recommend to anybody at any time.
Your father, after what happened to him in the tree when...
We don't know what happened to him.
I know, but
None of that matters. The past doesn't matter. Until Ahriman is stopped, nothing matters.
My last note for Development Diary number 4 actually ties in with the Development Diary relating to the on-demand dialogue system that they created. So, the on-demand dialogue system was created to provide navigational hints, background, story, and character exposition. I'm not exactly sure whether they achieved what they attempted to do with the open world and on-demand dialogue system that they created. They said that it's meant to be there to provide like exposition to things that the player might want to know relating to what just happened, or just like extra information as you're busy playing through the game. Because the developers wanted to create an open world, they felt that the player would maybe miss out on some information, because obviously certain players will maybe tackle some cities first compared to others. And to make sure that they get the full story, they would obviously need to implement a system that gets you clued up with what's going on in all of these areas. And that's where the dialogue system was created. But the issue that I kind of see with this is that it kind of goes back to the cutscene that I spoke about, I don't know when, where Alika kind of snaps on the prince a little bit. Not like in a major way, just like she has a bit of a harsher tone where it just feels like it's out of nowhere, and it kind of makes it seem as if you should have watched that cutscene first, or that cutscene was supposed to happen first before maybe one of the previous encounters. So even though this on-demand dialogue system is supposed to be there to kind of get the player up to clue with some information relating to the area, the characters, and the world, sometimes it just feels like maybe it wasn't in depth enough. But after watching like the rest of the video, I see where they came from with this idea, and I feel like it's a good idea. It's just I feel as if it could have gone a bit further, maybe just a little bit, to make sure that as you're busy playing through the game, the interactions between the prince and Alika don't feel all of a sudden strange. Even though what I just said now might seem like I'm not a fan of the system or how it was implemented, that's not actually the case. I do think that they did an amazing job with like trying to incorporate an open world with a story that you can follow if you want to. And I think my only critique is just that like there are moments where it just feels like it doesn't fit with whatever's happening cutscene wise. So the dialogue system, or the on-demand dialogue system, is there if you want more information, and it saves the player from being forced into cutscenes that they don't really want to maybe watch. So you'll have cutscenes here and there, but they won't provide like the full story. They'll provide plot points for you, but they won't go in depth. That's where the dialogue system comes in. So instead of like forcing the player to sit through, I don't know how many hours of dialogue they've recorded. I think one of the developers said that they've recorded like maybe 1,000 hours. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that incorrectly, but basically they recorded a lot of dialogue, and obviously I feel like they'd want to use it and not get rid of it because it won't fit in the game. So to kind of make sure that they use what they've recorded but not chase away players with like excessive cutscenes, that's where the system comes in. And it's a really good one where if you are interested in the story, you can like interact with Alika. I think they called it I'm not sure if it's called the chat button, but I think maybe it is actually just called the on-demand dialogue button. And Alika will provide you with information about the area, the characters, even the enemies, like who they were before they were corrupted. Sometimes she'll reveal stuff about herself, and rarely the prince will actually reveal something about himself as well as you're busy playing. So it feels like a nice crossover between giving the player all the information that they need if they want it, because I do feel like if I had to be stuck in 1,000 hours of cutscenes, this game, I don't even know if I would actually make it through this game. The downside of some of this is that the dialogue system they've created it's kind of limited. I wouldn't say limited, but it's locked to whatever event happens. So Alika won't talk about something that happened maybe five levels ago or half an hour ago. She will only comment on something that's just happened. So if you don't engage with her or engage with the dialogue system after each boss fight or after entering a certain area, there is actually information that you can miss, and that's not something I was aware of playing through this game. So that's actually something new that I learned, and I feel like, even though I keep saying that my next playthrough is gonna be a bit of a drag because I have to do the light seed collecting again, the dialogue system is actually something that I'd want to engage with more, even though in this playthrough I engaged with it a lot. Just knowing that there might actually be some story bit that I missed out on makes me want to play through it again and find out what I can. But I don't think there's a way for me to know if I've explored all the dialogue options.
When you were out there traveling, what's the most incredible thing you saw?
I don't know. Lots of things.
Tell me one.
What do you want to hear?
Something that took your breath away.
Mountain ice. It shines like diamonds. I've seen walls of it as tall as buildings. Deep blue, blinding white. If you touch it, it burns. It's cold, but it turns to fire in your hand for just a moment. Then it's gone. Diamonds to water. Your turn. Tell me something about you.
Tell you what.
Oh, I don't know. How about, who was your last boyfriend?
Never had one.
Never?
Never.
If you've never had a boyfriend,
I'm very well read.
there are lots of things best experienced in person.
Your turn to confess. Tell me about your family.
They were killed. My family, they died.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it was a long time ago.
What happened?
A war. Someone else's war.
Were you young when you lost your parents?
Old enough to understand it was time to run away. My uncle took me. My parents stayed to protect the city. They'd collect me once it was safe. They never collected me.
Must have been difficult.
People live, people die. They chose to die for someone else's cause.
Your parents died with honor, to protect other people.
They died. Does the rest of it matter? You make your own path. I'm not gonna let Armin kill me or you.
The interaction that just took place, I think, is a perfect example of like learning something new about each of the characters. And as I said before, this game is 20 years old, but this was actually the first time I heard those lines when playing the game. I had no idea about the prince's family, like, whenever I played the game. It wasn't something that, like, it doesn't take place in any of the cutscenes. He doesn't talk about them at all. So hearing about that now was like a surprise to me. I do think it is in the game's manual, but again, back then I never bothered to look at it. So interacting with the dialogue system over here taught me something new about the character, and it actually links up with my final note on the on-demand dialogue system, where the more you interact with it, like, the more you obviously learn about the characters, but it kind of it shows how their relationship is growing. Even though it's slowly, it's growing either way. And at the end of the game, it doesn't feel so strange where at this point it's basically spoilers, I think, but the prince and Alika obviously, like, are much closer at the end of the game than they are when they first met. But if you interact with the dialogue system, that random character change doesn't feel so out of place. And I mean, like, the cutscenes also do a good job of showing how they grow closer, but I feel as if interacting with the dialogue system actually emphasizes that even more, because they start revealing more about themselves, and even to you as the player, you start learning more about the characters. And by the end of the game, it's not like a big surprise as to why the prince does what he does. It's just like, you've spent all this time with the character, you kind of know more or less what he's going to do. It's not like it doesn't seem out of character or out of place. Earlier I mentioned something about not knowing whether I've explored all of the dialogue options, and I think the only way that I know I've done that might actually be on the PlayStation, if there's a trophy for it. So the trophy hunting playthrough will take place at some point, even though it means that I'm gonna have to, like, again, do the light seed collecting. But I'm actually looking forward to interacting with the dialogue system a bit more, just to kind of see what else there is about the characters that I don't know. I'll actually be surprised if there's something new that I learn about them, but I shouldn't be, because like I said, I learned something new about them during this playthrough, and I'm keen to see what else there is that I maybe blitzed through on previous playthroughs and this playthrough. And even though I keep on complaining about having to do the 1001 light seeds again, I realize that maybe it's not actually going to be that bad, since I know more or less now what I'm getting myself into, because this was the first time that I did it. So now I know what I'm in for, and more importantly, I know where to look. A lot of the ones that I struggled with, it's almost like what I mentioned earlier, where I think it was earlier or in a previous video, where a lot of the things that are a bit more challenging for me, they tend to stick with me a bit more compared to the ones that compared to challenges that are easier. So I'm not sure if at this point I collected a light seed that I was struggling with, but initially I thought it was a glitch, but now I know how to kind of just get those, and I know about like 3 or 4, maybe more, light seeds that are cleverly hidden away. But obviously this, on our next playthrough, I'll kind of have an idea. Okay, don't forget to look at this area, because I found it during this playthrough, and now it won't be as difficult.
Nice catch.
Had practice.
I'm not sure if I made a mistake with my final point that I made for the development diary on the on-demand dialogue system, but it has to do with the save me system, or what the developers like to call the second chance mechanism. So this was actually something that I found a bit very interesting, because it's actually a system that a majority of games have to make sure that players don't feel like you only have one chance at this challenge. So in the Sands of Time trilogy, the second chance system is basically the rewind system, or the Dagger of Time, where you can explore the level. You can make different attempts at puzzles or at your combat encounters. You can basically experiment as you're going through the game, and you don't have to fear that you only have one chance at doing this. You have that second chance mechanism where you are encouraged to explore or take risks with certain things. And I feel like the Sands of Time trilogy is a good example of where players have the opportunity to just experiment more with what they want to do with combat. So maybe in my case, I know that I like to engage with the counter-attacking system, whereas maybe other players would like to be more aggressive and just attack. I know I've seen players also not use the blocking system to kind of get through combat, but that also shouldn't be something that's discouraged, because obviously that's their playstyle. But if that playstyle doesn't kind of like work for them, then you have the rewind ability to just maybe course correct your attempt.
I'm not that heavy. The palace rooms are 3 large halls across 3 floors. The concubine has probably taken the top floor as her own.
Any way we can tell what's real and what's not?
Just use your instincts.
Those would be the same instincts that led me into this mess.
Law of averages. You've got to be right sometime.
Like a lot of players, I initially believed that the save me system actually took away a lot of the challenge that the previous games had, because no matter what mistake you make, Alika will always be there to save you. So after watching the Developer Diary, the developers actually pointed out that there are actually penalties in the game for making too many mistakes or just making mistakes. I'm going to use the word issue for lack of a better word, is that if you made a mistake, the penalty would be fairly high, whereas in this game the cost for your mistakes aren't that high, so the penalty doesn't actually feel that much like a penalty, or at least for me it didn't feel like a penalty. So in previous games, if you made a mistake in a combat encounter, you would die and then you would have to restart the encounter from the beginning, whereas in this game you can't die, but the penalty is basically Alika saves you, but then the enemy actually regains some of their health, which funny enough I only noticed during this playthrough. Before I never actually took note of that. I just thought, oh, this fight is actually longer than I thought. And then for traversal in the older games, if you made a mistake, you either rewind or you die, and then you have to start from the beginning again. In this game, it's basically the same, where Alika will transport you to the safest platform, or the safest and most stable platform that you last left, instead of like dropping you near to where you made your mistake. So surprisingly, the save me system in this game isn't that different from the previous game. It's just that like over here the developers basically removed the need for a loading screen, so you could basically make a mistake, Alika saves you, and you just pick up from there, which I get is that sense of flow that they wanted to maintain. But the unfortunate thing is that the game still doesn't provide that challenge that players from the previous games were maybe looking for when coming into this one. Maybe the challenge would then be trying to master the combos during the combat encounters.
I've seen a few security setups in my time. This beats them all.
It's a black gate. It guards the lair of the corrupted. If we want to drive them out, we'll have to get inside.
How do we do that?
Weaken their hold on the land.
The final note that I made about the save me system was that the developers described it as a rolling checkpoint, which I never actually noticed while playing up until they actually like pointed it out. Yes, all games, I feel like all games actually have a rolling checkpoint. It's just that with this one, you basically get back into the game without having to go through a loading screen. So I feel like that's something that I'm impressed by, because if you kind of just want to play the game, it's not as tedious as having to go through another menu and then kind of starting again from the beginning, whereas over here you make your mistake and you just carry on. So I like the fact that they incorporated that and kept that in mind when designing the game, that okay, maybe some players don't actually want to deal with this nonsense right now. Just give them a platform to start from and take it from there. I'll be moving over to the last 2 development diary videos that I went through, which relates to Alika and the prince. So these are more just like character descriptions that they pointed out. but I just made short notes on them. And I feel like the game's manual might actually go more in depth on this, but I'm still just going to read the last bit of what I made notes on. So, the way the developers described Alika, to me seems like she's a very purpose-driven person. She has a sense of duty, she's fairly stern and intelligent. Initially that's a personality when you first meet her, but over time you kind of learn that she's light-hearted, she's sympathetic, curious and very witty. And as you progress through the game, you learn that a lot of the traits that she has actually align with the prince. And when they describe the prince, I kind of made notes saying that he's a wanderer searching for meaning. He's isolated and lives in the present and is very carefree. I like how the developers basically they use that as an explanation as to why he doesn't hesitate doing what he's doing, which is like the traversal section of the game, just jumping across most of these gaps that would basically kill him. But I mean, Alika's there to save him. But he's so carefree that he's willing to like risk his life to do a lot of the things that he does. Even when some of the dialogue he will like complain saying that Alika and Ormazd are trying to kill him. The prince doesn't seem to care about anything at first, and that just might be a defense mechanism. But the more you spend time with him, he kind of shows that he does care. He just guards himself because of past experiences. He shares a lot of traits with Alika, and you learn this as you progress through the game.
This will let us enter fertile grounds in the Citadel and the Vale.
If by some miracle you managed to make it this far into the video, all that I have to say is thank you for listening and thank you for watching. There is a lot in the Developer Diaries that I learned. I also realized that I've been calling them development diaries every now and then, but I feel like you understand what I'm trying to say. In the next video, I do plan to start reading from the game's manual, and I feel as if I might run out a little bit over there, but I'll see what happens. So, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.